Well, I can't think of a better way to start a day and get our minds together on the same page. You know, we're here celebrating FNIGC's 20 years of data research, and this is something, I'm not a doctor, I'm not in the health field. If you can consider sport, what I did, a very retired Olympic athlete. I'm now a mother of 3, which I tell people is way harder than being an Olympic athlete. Way harder. I mean, my baby had fevers for 5 days last week, and as I was holding her and she's coughing in my face, and I'm gonna so get this, and you can't really put her aside and go, sorry, I have work to do. Can you be sick over there? And so yes, of course, if I sound a little bit like congested, it's because I am, but I'm on antibiotics, so it's all good. I think we should get going, and I'm very interested in to hear a lot of what you have to offer, because 20 years of hard work is a lot of insight that we need to share. But we need to hear from the man who leads this ship, and Executive Director Jonathan Dewar. He's only been with the organization for 4 months, and he has been recognized as a leader in healing and reconciliation and Indigenous health and well-being, education, policy, and research for over a decade. And he has held a number of key roles over the years, over a decade of senior leadership experience in qualitative and quantitative research, program evaluation, policy analysis, strategic planning, governance, and communication. Jonathan is of mixed heritage, descendant from the Huron-Wendat, French, and Scottish and Canadian grandparents. Please welcome Jonathan to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. As Juanique said, I am the newest member of the national team, so I have the least amount to say. And hopefully that will contribute to us getting back towards the schedule that we had set out for you today. As the newest member of the team, I am nonetheless thrilled to see all of you here. I am thrilled to be able to celebrate with you, because today really is about celebrating the work that you've done over 20 years. I didn't do this work. I come in and have the opportunity to work with many of you. Many of you I have not yet met, and so I look forward to the next 2 days to having that opportunity to do that. But more than anything, I look forward to celebrating with you the work that you did. Some of you have been doing this for over 20 years. Some of you may be newer, but you have been embraced by the communities and by the organizations doing this work. And they hold you up when they talk to us, the staff in the national office. They hold you up to say, that we are proud of this work and we are proud of the people doing this work. So really that's what these 2 days are about, is bringing you together and encouraging you, asking you to tell your stories about the work that you do, the data that you have collected, the data that you are allowing to be shared with the world, tells stories of strength and resilience. It also tells stories of challenge, but more importantly, it communicates to the world how First Nations, reserve communities, and northern communities are coming together to use this information, to apply this information, to make the best decisions, to move forward with strength, honoring the people who came before us, our ancestors, but also honoring our children and grandchildren, and all the children and grandchildren who will be born in generations and generations to come. So that's what this is about. And I'm going to move off the podium very quickly after I say a few thank yous, and we're going to move into that program, the program that has been designed around you so that we can tell the world about the work that we are doing together. So I start by saying miigwech, a very special miigwech to Elder Claudette Commanda. As somebody who grew up in Ottawa, this welcome that I'm giving is very different than the welcome that an Algonquin person, particularly an elder like Claudette, can give. And so I feel really honored to follow her up here after those words that she shared in English, in French, and in Anishinaabemowin. So thank you, miigwech, for that. I'm also privileged to follow another incredible woman on the podium, Juanique Horn-Miller. She didn't say enough about herself. I hope that you have the opportunity to talk with her on the margins of this conference because she too has amazing stories to tell about sport and about motherhood, about being a proud Mohawk woman. And so I look forward to having myself having that opportunity to do that. I welcome you here as the newest member of the team, as I said. But again, you did the work. And I want to acknowledge the fact that, yes, we have the national staff who's been hard at work. The national office, the First Nations Information Governance Center, was created in 2010. But of course, some of our board members have been with the Regional Health Survey since 1997. And so we have that through line of expertise and passion and dedication to this work. And I want to celebrate those people who were there from the beginning, some of whom are still with us. But for those people who have come and gone from the work, I also want to acknowledge all of them. And some of you will be thinking about some of those people with great fondness in your heart, and I encourage you to do that over the next 2 days. I talked about the work that I didn't do, the work that you did. 24,000 First Nations people in more than 250 First Nations communities took the time to do this work with you, with us. And so I honor those people. We would not be here without the participation in our communities. And so it's essential to say miigwech to all of those people. They really give of themselves when they participate in this work. You know on the ground, on the front lines, how much we ask of community members. So for community members to continue to work with us in this way, I think is a great honor. And so I say thank you. I say miigwech to all of those people as well. I want to acknowledge our regional partners. This work cannot happen. The national office is nothing without our regional partners, so I say thank you to you. Regional coordinators within those partner organizations. If nothing can be done without our regional partners, nothing can certainly be done without the people who do this work, who coordinate on the ground in our regions. I say thank you to you as well. Our regional data analysts, administrators, field workers, First Nations leadership, of course. At the end of the day, we are all working within systems of accountability and responsibility and honor. And First Nations leadership, of course, is an important and an essential part of that. We have community level workers, and of course, many others who work with us to ensure that this work is done to the highest degree of professionalism. That, I think, needs to be said. That this is, yes, by First Nations, for First Nations, but when the world looks at what we do, when our government partners, when our academic partners, when partners across various sectors of society look at what we do, they see an incredibly high bar. They see a very high standard, and I think you are all to be applauded for that. It is outstanding work, and I'm so privileged to be, as I said, a new member of the team. I'd like to say a lot about Monique, I'd like to say a lot about Elder Commanda, and I will on the margins to many of you, but in the interest of moving forward, I do want to take up as little time as possible with you. I want to acknowledge, of course, our government partners, our funders, the First Nations Inuit Health Branch, formerly of Health Canada, now moving into Indigenous Services. Some of the Health Canada, some of the FNIB folks who are here can talk to you about the complexity of that. I don't have that burden. But we look forward to an ongoing, meaningful relationship with FNIB, of course with what was once known as INAC, now Indigenous Services, and even Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, among many other partners at the federal level. So I want to thank and acknowledge those people in the room and the leadership on those sides of the table that have brought us to where we are. I know there are incredible things in front of us. The budget that was released a couple of weeks ago is an indication of where we can go, not just with this government, but where we can go because the work is such quality work, nobody will ever turn away from it. Nobody would look at what you do and say, this is not worth supporting. So that's the note that I want to leave you with, that we are going to places that you envisioned, that the people who started this work before you envisioned years and years ago. And that's what's in front of us. So I say thank you, miigwech, to all of you for being here. And I look forward to having conversations with every one of you, if not over the next 2 days, then over the next months. So thank you, and I'll invite Juanique back up. Miigwech.
Quickly before we get into our presentations, I just have a few housekeeping items. You all got this in your package. It is a conference consent form. So we're hoping that because this whole event is being live streamed for Facebook, so if you do not want to be filmed or photographed, we're going to move people from that table over there. If there's anybody who does not want to be filmed or does not want to be part of the filming, they will be out of the way of the filming. So if you can just let Katie know, who's going to lift her hand up, if you don't want to be filmed, we'll make accommodations for that. But if they would really love it. She says, I don't know how realistic it is. I'm like, these are researchers who are getting data. They're all about these kind of getting these forms back from people, right? So come on, let's participate. Let's get these forms back to her to make sure that we have these consent forms. We also are hoping that you guys participate and get the word out there that this is happening with the Twitter hashtag RHSAT20. You see it at the bottom there. Let people know that you're here and what's happening and what you think. And also you can participate on facebook.com/FNIGC to also let people know what's happening. So it's a lot of interesting information, and I'm sure a lot of people that couldn't make it here would love to know what's going on, so get the word out there. Our next speaker is Bonnie Healy, and she's here to talk about the last 20 years, which is really what you guys are here to celebrate, and she just wants to come and give an overview. Bonnie Healy is a registered nurse from the Kainai Blood Nation and former regional coordinator for the RHS survey. She is currently the operations manager at the Alberta First Nations Information Governance Centre, and her work has been based on the Alberta Chief's directive to uphold the First Nations principle of OCAP, of the First Nations data, information, and traditional knowledge. Bonnie is the chair of the FNIGC Board of Directors. Please welcome Bonnie.
Okay, idamik skanatuni. Nisto anago kaboyaki, nimptoto egenai. My grandfather's clan is the Mamuiks, the fish eaters clan, but we had been following that clan since the time of colonization, I guess, the paternalistic switch that happened in our nation, but we are now switching to following our mother's clan, so following the waters of our mothers. And my grandmother's clan, or my grandmother's mother's clan, would have been the Lone Fighters clan. So these are things that are changing for my life at the nation level. So I just want to thank you for joining us here in the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg people, on whose lands we are gathered. And I want to welcome, and as we pay tribute and celebrate 20 years of regaining First Nations data sovereignty on the path to the First Nations Regional Health Survey. So on behalf of First Nations Information Governance Centre and the Board of Directors, it's my great honor to speak with you today. I want to have pay special thanks to Claudette for the morning prayer and starting us in a good way, bringing the ancestors in here to join us as we celebrate 20 years. And my board members around the room that are here, as I greeted them this morning, I had a bit of a mishap yesterday morning. For those of you traveling, I don't know if anybody got caught up in the Air Canada global system failure. So what did they do before computers? I didn't see anybody grabbing paper and pen too quickly. So I had to switch to WestJet and managed to get on one of the last 3 flights coming out. I'm happy to be here with that introduction. Anybody catch the acronym OCAP? It was the first time I'd heard it as those letters, but that's OCAP that we all celebrate and know and are trying to assert at the nation levels. So I just want to really just talk about the past 20 years. And my joining of the Regional Health Survey initiatives in the province of Alberta happened around 2005, and then finally took me out of my nursing career about 10 years ago permanently. And as we developed our regional center, the FNIGC. And the work that I came into, and I don't know, I think a lot of us that are in the room when we first come to this table, it was overwhelming. It was a lot of what I used to say, I used to get migraines because I couldn't catch up with the acronyms that they were saying, and the language was different. But these were very intelligent individuals at the table that were fighting for asserting data sovereignty. And I wanted to be part of it. They planted that seed of passion inside of me, and I've never looked back. The importance of information at the nation level spoke to me, and that's what I've been fighting for the past 10 years. And this last round of data collection for the Regional Health Survey, I didn't just want this to be another initiative of trying to get the numbers up, trying to get the participation up, create a report to collect dust on the shelves of health directors or leadership's, bookshelves. We wanted First Nations to use the information. So we started to do repatriation of data at the nation level and really working with our nations to develop community wellness plans using those data sources. So we're pulling surveillance data from the province of Alberta, we're pulling the RHS data, we're pulling the FNIB, non-insured health benefit data, and the StatsCan data. We're correcting it if it's wrong, and a lot of it is wrong. So giving that opportunity for First Nations to have the right information. And the changes that are happening at the nation level, I'm so humbled and overwhelmed by how they are using and implementing information. When they ask for our support, and I don't like to be called the expert of anything because I'm not the expert of anything. What I know when I learn this data world is I know a little bit, but I have still a lot more to know, to learn, and to listen. But I was working with a community recently that we're trying to figure out how to use the information and asking for our guidance and our support. And when they said, you know what, we're going to create our vision and mission statement completely in Cree. And I said, yes, that's what you need to do. We're here to help, we're here to support, we're here to guide you. And as they develop their health indicators, also completely in their language, those are things that we're celebrating. And that's what the Regional Health Survey was about. It was about trying to really develop those indicators. This is a Western tool, we know that. We know it's off of the Canada Health Survey. And, but really trying to make it for us so that it was relevant when it came down to using the data at the First Nations level. So today we celebrate 2 decades of RHS data. And I'd especially like to acknowledge the ancestors and people of the 250 plus participating nations, past, present, and future. And thank you all for being with us today to support the work of the Regional Health Survey and data sovereignty efforts of the Knowledge Keepers. The FNIGC are regional partners, technicians, leading thinkers, and experts advancing First Nations data governance, management, and research ethics. The Regional Health Survey was established in the early mid-90s, but our first pilot was 97. And it was the first survey of its kind. And I'm happy to say it still is, and the only survey that's on reserve, that's by First Nations for First Nations. The RHS has had a lasting impact in First Nations and communities across the country, and the power of data has many examples of how data has brought positive change in First Nations through capacity building toward data sovereignty. OCAP gives voice to the people as data drives policy and self-determination. We are here to recognize the hard work of our regions and the contributions of First Nations communities and individuals who took part in the RHS process over the years. The latest phase of RHS Phase 3 from March 2015 to December 2016, as Jonathan stated, more than 24,000 surveys were completed. I'm happy to be here with one of our lead coordinators that managed to get, I think, almost in the high 90s percentile in the Treaty 8 Northern area. I still don't know how she did it because Alberta has not really got a good track record for high numbers. So I'm grateful to Cindy for being here. This is not an easy accomplishment. There's many layers to getting participation. Many visits. I don't know how many tires I changed to try and get to communities, to get band council resolutions before we could get them to participate. How many times we had to go to the northern communities to retrain and train. But it was worth the efforts because now you're starting to see the benefits. The communities are using the information, and that's what it was all about. So for First Nations, data has not been used in planning and advocacy for the benefit of our First Nations. Data is regularly removed from Indigenous communities, and while we are researched to death, we still see a consistent shortage of data for relevant use in our communities. We have long struggled to retain our rights as sovereign, self-governing people. Early expressions of Indigenous data sovereignty can be seen in Indigenous oral practices, which include a complex set of rights and responsibilities concerning the use of community-held information, including sovereign rights, that have been established through our inherent rights and treaty processes that recognize our rights. For the Blackfoot and many Indigenous cultures, we have a culture of transference and must earn the right to gather, hold, and transfer data through actions, language, and song. In the 21st century, another form of our sovereignty is at stake, data sovereignty, which is managing and governing information. But without proper resources, collecting data and organizing into meaningful knowledge is costly and means that sometimes we must forgo having access to our information or rely on outsiders with the resources to gather and analyze data, which typically involves significant compromises over the control of data and our sovereignty over our own information. That is where the nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship is critical. One of our analysts was selected as a global Indigenous ambassador for information governance and is currently in Puerto Rico attending the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. I didn't know what a big deal that was. I actually didn't pay attention to it, but it's the .com people. And right now, the Amazon tribes are fighting for the expropriation of their name, Amazon.com. And they are really trying to assert their Indigenous right for the use of that name that's being used for monetary gain without any benefit to them. And I'm proud of our young analysts that took on the challenge to attend this conference, knowing that Puerto Rico didn't have much electricity because they're still suffering from the impacts of this tsunami that happened last year. Privacy and confidentiality are fundamental issues connected with data sovereignty. And that is why we need legislation and the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to prevent intrusive data collection. And I'd like to say that the relationship that we have with Renee and FNIGC, now I always get that wrong. It's people have said Renee, but it's Rennie. Okay. have been in there in the trenches with us, and I don't think people really know how close the relationship is, but really working with us to really trying to, knowing that we're going into the communities with not enough resources to build the capacity that we need to do, the information infrastructures like the servers and everything like that. They know that we're going in with a shortfall, but they're working with us to try and do as much as they can to really support the nations in the development of their own information governance systems. So that I appreciate. Thank you. Indigenous control of data collection and dissemination is the obvious solution to the problems associated with exercising data sovereignty. This involves being able to dictate what information is collected under what circumstances, and then being able to determine how it is used and for what purposes. However, non-Indigenous researchers and governments are often unwilling to fully accommodate the interests of Indigenous sovereignty. We all know there is a desperate need to address healthcare and data gaps. A big part of that is the management and governance of our own data information. We are the fastest growing demographic, but as our numbers grow, so do our concerns and our socioeconomic conditions, our traditions, and our health, and the growing disparity between Indigenous peoples and the rest of Canada. Through a variety of historical sources, including Canada's legislation and policies, when it comes to our treaty right to health, education, and children and families, as data drives policy, we are here to assert our right to govern our data. In Alberta, we had an interesting meeting about 3 weeks ago, and the chiefs really asserted the review of how health is delivered in First Nations in Alberta, and really wanted to call for an evaluation using information to really address the inadequacies of the First Nations health policy. They don't want status quo anymore, and we are so happy to see that they are pushing for initiatives that are going to really use information to do those reviews that should have been done a long time ago. So things are changing. We're really using information to create that true transformational change that we're all so desperate for at the community level. The only thing that separates our people from anyone else is the opportunity through increased communications, collaboration, and participation on the data management. We must move forward on the fundamentals of OCAP so that we can continue to build partnerships and relationships and have the ability to act and have a sense of being involved in a true management process driving policy and legislation. We're happy to share in Alberta. We've trained over 600 individuals in OCAP, and I have to tell you now, I get a lot of emails from nations and researchers, and nations not wanting to participate unless FNIGC has seen their research project. So OCAP certification has been really powerful for us, and as First Nations really assert their rights to have OCAP respected and to do data gathering and initiatives in a responsible, ethical way has been really helpful to all of our communities. The stewardship and principles of OCAP have always been with us. As First Nations, we have always been researchers, gathering and collecting data, storing and protecting what is ours, handed down through the generations. We have always protected our sacred right and our way of life, our traditional knowledge. For us, we still sing the songs, speak, dance, and practice the ways of our ancestors because we are of this land and we live through the generations because of the protection and stewardship of our songs, language, and oral practices. When we talk about building relationships, we talk about creating ethical space as ceremony. And I'm very grateful to Willie Ermine, the Cree scholar from Saskatchewan, who has spent his life work really trying to have us understand ethical space as ceremony. We've had an opportunity to interview Willie, and he talks about ethics as really the essence of a human being. And so as we create our partnerships in Alberta, and as we're negotiating, and we know we're going to negotiate on difficult things and difficult relationships, we know that our provincial and federal government are tied to legislation and policies that will make it difficult to have relationships of sharing information. We set aside those things on a temporary basis, and we meet together as human beings, the essence of the human spirit, getting to know each other and working together to have common goals, which is better outcomes for First Nations. And this has really changed how we relate at the tables and how we work together. I'm very grateful to Willie Ermine for all of his hard work and the concepts of ethical space. We are gathered here to breathe life into OCAP, and those who have been on the tables and some of our board members, like Jonathan had said, have been here since the beginning. And one of them that I want to honor today is Dr. Kathy Avru-Canoe. And without Kathy's gentle nudges and guidance, FNIGC wouldn't be what it is today. She was my mentor as I joined the board of directors in the early, about 10 years ago. And without Kathy really guiding me, I don't think I would have done what we did in Alberta. I talked the chiefs into passing an OCAP resolution. Thanks to Kathy, she shared it with me, her Manitoba resolution. And I had no arguments from the chiefs. They understood it, they knew what it meant. They wanted me to make it stronger, so I did. And that's where our journey started, on the creation of our own center. And that's about implementing OCAP at the regional level. The board of directors was new, and Kathy and I remember the summer trying to incorporate FNIGC, signing and scrambling and getting things done as people needed a paycheck. And I was meeting Cecile Tournier at the Stampede in a rainstorm to have corporation papers signed. A lot of people don't know that, but that's a true story. And for those of you that know Cecile, she's a huge chuck wagon family, and that takes place at the Stampede in Calgary. So I think with really staying on task, I really want to just emphasize there's many celebrations over the years with the RHS. The RHS visited the United Nations a number of years ago, and that story is available, I believe, on is it on our website? No? If it's not, we'll put it there. Because that's a celebration, and that was one of our real big wins, and it was actually Dr. Valerie Gideon that was with that team that came down there. And when I joined FNIGC, Val Gideon was the co-chair, I believe, of FNIGC as a committee. And the data has been really beneficial on a national sense. I think a lot of people who don't know, the Regional Health Survey data was used to initiate the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative, to increase dollars for home care, and it was used to do the evaluation of the National Aboriginal Youth Suicide Strategy. So we have been really successful on the national level, and the national team, I can't thank them enough, Albert, Katie, and all those others that I'm going to forget names. But I remember much again to Dr. Kathy's urging for me to participate on the Tri-Council Policy Statement, Chapter 9. And this was new territory for me. And as we were reviewing this chapter, it was really difficult. So I came a day early, and I asked Albert, can you help me with this? So we were sitting there racking our brains and trying to wordsmith, and finally I looked at Albert and I said, there's no fixing this. It's biblical data, it's biblical language. I said, let's fight for a preamble. So we were fighting for the drafting of the preamble. And if there's anything I can be proud of in the Tri-Council Chapter 9, is in the preamble it states that the research ethics of nations would preempt that chapter. And that's the most important part of Chapter 9 that people need to pay attention to. So I think with that, I'm going to ask Winique to come up here and join me so that we can honor Dr. Kathy, I'm going to call her Kathy, as I know her. Those who don't know Kathy, is Wab Canoe's mom. So, and it's my great pleasure to acknowledge, a mentor, a friend, somebody that I always came to for support and guidance, and she never ever turned me away. She'd always managed to make things positive, even though it looked like the darkest hour. And very, very kind and respectful, and also very fierce in really making sure that we were asserting sovereignty and being respected as we were doing it. So thank you so much for all of your life's work, Kathy. Thank you. If you could come up here and join us. Where did you put it? I think you, Brad, where is it? It's right behind you. Oh, my goodness. It's a prize. You don't get the suitcase. Got beat up. So Kathy, this was made by my mother. I can't think of a better way to honor you, so thank you. The other way. Thank you so much, Kathy. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
I don't have any arms anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do you have any words? Sorry.
Yeah, I am overwhelmed, and I think Bonnie, actually, she says that I was her mentor, but I was actually phoning her quite a bit in the last few years, so we share that a lot. I wasn't there at the beginning of RHS. I heard about it after we did the first survey, but you could see the potential in it, and then we had to wrench it back from the University of Manitoba, actually, because in one of the first surveys we subcontracted to them, and then all of a sudden they thought, well, that should be our name, and we should be part of the committee of AFN, and that's our data, and we had to. Leona Starr was there at the beginning of this fight to get our data back. It's incredible how academics and other institutions think they know better. This is the 21st century. There are treaties. There are Dakota people who have prehistoric treaties, as do all the First Nations. And you just can't think that way anymore. Murray Sinclair, now a senator and previously the TRC commissioner, he tells people you have to think differently, you have to act differently. We'll never change anything unless that's what we do. So I am overwhelmed and thankful and grateful. Thank you. Miigwech, Masi, Wopida, Egosani.
Nice and warm.
Wow, I love to see when people are honored. I got to witness. I have two sisters that are doctors. One's a medical doctor. One's a doctor of anthropology, sociology. But when I remember watching my sister Ogista when she was doing her master's in epidemiology, and she got to work with the Kahnawake School's Diabetes Prevention Project when it first got started with Alex McCumber and Dr. Ann McCauley, and just what they were trying to do to raise awareness and trust about data collection, especially when it was targeting at kids. And you won't find a more suspicious crew than the Mohawks, right? So like, it was really something to see them go out there and that small group of people to get this data. And we all know how, I've seen how Kahnawake has really benefited from all of that data collection and then the empowerment of our community and our health. And so, you know, it's honoring people like, we just saw that people who are there at the beginning and help each other. And it's kind of sometimes lonely work when you're out there data collecting. So getting that chance to do that is really amazing. I know we're supposed to have a break right now, but we wanted to just have one more presentation before we had our coffee break, and then we can get set up for our panel. Jim Molinar is the director of Bell, Brown, Molinar, and Delicate Consulting. He specializes in program evaluation and review, performance measurement, integrated management systems, including strategic and business planning, reporting, and governance. He has worked with many, many government departments, including the Canadian Partnerships Against Cancer, Health, Canada Health Infoway, First Nations Information's Governance Centre, National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, National Association of Friendship Centres, and the Métis National Council and Métis Nation of Ontario. Please welcome Jim Molinar.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am here this morning with my colleague, Brian Bell, who will come up after my presentation, and Brian's in the corner there. Other people on our team, Jonathan Brown and James Molinar, who happens to be my son, were not able to make it today. We would like to thank you very much for inviting us to be here today at this really important conference. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the evaluation of the RHS that we've been carrying out. We started in October 2017, and today we're at the latter stages of that evaluation. And I would like to share with you some of the key messages and findings to date. It was interesting listening to the previous speakers. I'm just wondering, in terms of the slide deck, it's coming? Okay. I can flip through these first few slides easily. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the evaluation itself. And then I'd like to outline the key messages and findings. I would like to leave time for discussion, but I do have this advantage that everyone's probably dying for a cup of coffee, so I'm anticipating a very short discussion period. But any feedback you'd be able to provide us at this stage would be much appreciated. It was interesting listening to Jonathan and then Bonnie talk, and that, thank you. Listening to them talk, because many of the messages they were sharing with you are just echoed in what I'm going to be saying. So about the evaluation, the two objectives: to identify the impacts of both the RHS process and the outcomes, and to highlight the benefits that have been provided. Our focus in the evaluation was on First Nation communities And that's when you look at the communities at the local level, at the regional level, and the national level. And I want to just emphasize, when I use the word region here, I'm talking about the FNIGC region, so that's basically provinces and territories. I know within some of the provinces, the FNIGC regions, you talk about your own regions, but I'm not talking about that. In the scope of this evaluation, we included the RHS since its inception, so that's the 20 years. We recognize that RHS 3 is being released today. So to say what are the impacts of that in terms of community use is premature. So we wanted to know what has been done with previous data from the RHS. We have been gathering examples of successes and beneficial impacts. In that, we've been trying to understand how these have taken place and why they've taken place, and also identify opportunities for improvement and further success and even greater impacts. So it's been a strength-based approach we've taken. We did follow a structured approach to the evaluation, so we went through 4 phases. The first phase was around project scoping and planning, and I've just talked to you a little bit about what that scope looked like. This is really our roadmap for the information gathering, and a key part of that was, in fact, meeting with regional survey partners, some communities, and some other stakeholders across provinces and territories. And we really would like to thank people in communities and organizations that hosted us, spent time with us, taught us a lot during our visits that were both in person and by telephone. We're now in phase 3, synthesis and analysis. And in fact, preparing for today was a very good way of sort of moving us out of the nice, fun part of data gathering and saying, so what does this all mean? So we are in that stage where now finishing also some remaining information gathering. We'll have an initial draft report by the end of March, and then finalize the report in April. Just as a little bit of a promo here, in our report, I hope you read it. You'll be able to read about findings, conclusions, and recommendations about the impacts as a result of the way the RHS was organized and delivered, but also, more importantly, I think, about the impacts that have been achieved. And those outcomes, the impacts expected, cover things like community and regional survey partner capacity, the actual RHS data sets and reports, changes in awareness and understanding of the RHS, so that people know it exists, that they know what it contains, they know what its potential use is, so they're basically prepared to use it. And we're also going to be looking at the actual use. And also, really importantly, it's fine to use it, but what has that done in terms of benefits, or what value has that brought? So the report will cover that. And finally, I use the word here alignment with OCAP, but just OCAP is a set of principles. Has the RHS basically operated, has been implemented within the framework of that set of principles. And in fact, what has it contributed to greater understanding around what that means in practice? So I'd like to now go into some of the impacts we've seen to date. And I just want to say before I start that this is what I'm going to present in the next few minutes is synthesized. It's compressed from hours and hours of time people spent with us, sharing information, their experiences, their knowledge with us. And inevitably, it reflects our understanding of what we heard. And so this is a bit of an opportunity to tell you about that, our understanding, and then get feedback from you as to whether we've come anywhere close to the mark and what your understanding would be. So I'll start with the organization and delivery of the RHS. You know, when we went to visited regions, had the opportunity to talk to them, huge variation in the way regions have approached implementation, organization, implementation, and delivery. Around a core piece, which is the RHS data that people are trying to gather. And what we see that those sort of customized approaches in the regions as being really a very strong indicator of sort of the maturity of the RHS organization and delivery. As I mentioned, there's great diversity in the approaches. You know, some regions, questions have been added to the core set of questions because they felt it important to gather information around that. In some regions, data is collected for all communities in the region beyond the sampling of communities for the RHS itself. In some regions, data gatherers are in each community, while others use mobile teams or mixed. So it goes on and on, the way people have organized to do this in the best way. In the course of our discussions, we even heard of one community we spoke with that has undertaken the entire process itself from beginning to end without a regional survey partner. So we also heard about what people consider to be the strengths and successes of the approach. And this flexible approach that I was just sort of giving some highlights from, we view as being a strength. It really says that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to the way this sort of exercise should be done. At the end of the day, though, you know, the important thing is that there's quality data that emerges that is useful for people and is used by them. The other thing which was really apparent as a real strength of the approach to us is just the extent to which people have thoughtfully considered what has worked, what has not worked, and opportunities for improvement. And we could see where improvements from successive cycles of the RHS took place. So that, I think, is a really important strength of the process as well. We also heard about challenges. So surprise, surprise, we heard about funding. Just the what could be done with more funding and how people have worked within the funding that is available. We heard about the extent of the match between what the survey is collecting in terms of data and what community priorities and needs are. We heard about the expectations of communities regarding data ownership, all the OCAP type material. And we also heard about just the fact that the RHS is not the only thing in town, that there are other data collection exercises going on, and what that means in terms of you know, the timing of these other things, what it means in terms of community participation. And you know, if that was the only issue, that would be probably simpler, but there's the whole world going on around as well, so there's a lot of context. So the ability and of communities to participate at certain times varies, and just the pragmatic solutions people have taken for that. In terms of the outcomes, impacts related to outcomes, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I think it's been touched on in the previous speakers, but one of the outcomes expected of the RHS was to build, sustain, and leverage capacity. And I think it's very safe to say, based on what we've heard so far, that generally the RHS, over time, through the successive cycles, has built capacity. It has built capacity to do the next cycle of the RHS. It's built capacity to help do other surveys. It has also built capacity that, in fact, we heard about communities and others taking advantage of to, for example, hire people into other positions. So it's been, I think, a very rich experience for a lot of people and been very helpful. The other surveys like FNIGC have also built capacity that has helped the RHS, so it's not a one-way street. Again, I'm generalizing somewhat, but the capacity at the community level has been mainly related to data collection. And in fact, there's even the extent of the capacity resident in communities depends on how the data collection was done in many cases, whether it was done by community-based people or mobile teams. At the regional survey partner level, capacity both in data collection and data analysis and reporting. I think it's important to note here, we heard the importance attached to having First Nations perspectives to be part of the data analysis and reporting capacity. So First Nations analysts, data managers, et cetera. We also heard there seems to be a lot of learning taking place on around data governance and the capacity required there. But there are now gaps, but the RHS has helped to identify where there are issues, et cetera, that are, say, OCAP. When you put OCAP principles into practice, what sorts of things come up, like the balance between privacy and community ownership, for example, or possession. So really interesting area, and I know Bonnie touched on that. Another area that outcome was expected was to build, sustain, and disseminate data sets and results. Again here, I think there's no one would question that data sets have been built and they've been disseminated, and that has improved. It's become stronger through successive cycles. As one person I interviewed said, there's really a treasure trove of information that's been assembled. Part of it now is to extract, to mine from that treasure trove in meaningful ways, they're useful ways. We saw a range of reporting approaches. So in some cases it's regional, in some cases thematic. Efforts to get data out to communities, data tables, profiles, bring it into other uses like community planning, community well-being plans. It's being disseminated in various ways, formal reports, presentations. Just looking at the program today, there will be dissemination of some of this information today as well. But it's interesting, there was sort of a recognized need for more. The reports be more meaningful for the communities, be put in terms, ways that they can actually pick it up and use it. And in fact, it was even suggested in one discussion, the idea of data navigators to help those who are not data experts in communities find their way through the available data and to be able to use it better. So lots of interesting ideas. In terms of moving on to awareness and understanding, so there's an outcome expected of the RHS to increase awareness and understanding of the RHS data, and how it can be used and the value it brings, for example, to evidence-based decision-making. And again, I think we can safely say that generally awareness and understanding has increased. It's stronger. It's growing stronger. That's both of the survey itself and how data and reports can be used. However, it's clear that there's an ongoing need to keep building and rebuilding awareness and understanding. People change. Leadership in communities changes. The administrators, managers, analysts change. And as well as just, for example, priorities of communities change. So this awareness and understanding, the building of that, is an ongoing effort. There's also currently a range of levels of awareness and understanding when you look across communities and also across groups within communities. We did find a lot of examples, cases where basically people talking about the importance of examples of use to help build awareness and understanding. People want to see, they learn by seeing what others have done. And just the Power of Data series, for example, from FNIGC is an example of and helps to provide proof of the evidence. We were told and provided many strong examples of how the use of the RHS data and results has grown over time. The report will contain a lot of those examples, but it's also limited, the use has been limited by things like sample size. So are we able to actually, we've got our data, but can we actually publish it so people can use it? And some of that's due to privacy issues. The match between the information that's gathered and what's sort of, in many cases, top of mind for communities, what their priorities are. Different sorts of leadership and management approaches. So the buy-in to sort of evidence-based decision-making varies across communities. And also the extent to which the RHS data has already been and work is being done on linking it with other data sources, other surveys. People spoke about, for example, electronic medical records, what's actually happening in the community or adjacent to it. This is my final slide, so we're almost there. In terms of the alignment with OCAP, certainly what we saw is that the RHS is organized and delivered in a way that is consistent with OCAP. And I think I've sort of mentioned this before, but it has provided sort of a test bed in a way for bringing some of the OCAP principles into practice. And I think this has helped to highlight the need for data governance as part of data sovereignty. I just wanted to end with a few words about the ultimate outcomes. So these are the really big so what questions. And here I just want to emphasize that these big so what questions, the RHS, you would hope to see that it contributes to these, but there are other contributors as well. So it's not the only thing involved. There's also a lot of context and other stakeholders at play. But, the first question, has the RHS contributed to communities understanding more about the health and well-being of their peoples? I think the short answer seems to be yes, but. Communities do want to know more. Sort of like, in fact, here, this is not a deficiency. This is actually basically people, I think, saying, wow, there's an opportunity here. And they want to know more about things which are important for their communities. Has the RHS contributed to communities promoting healthy lifestyles and practices? Again, I think it's a yes, but. Again, there's lots of examples. But there's also a whole lot of opportunity. And in terms of data sovereignty, again, we've talked about that. The RHS is helping to reveal data governance issues that may affect what OCAP looks like in practice. So just to close, I've given you in this presentation what we thought are some of the highlights that we've heard so far in the evaluation. I think the overall story is that a strong foundation has been built. There's been improvement continuously. There are a lot of successes. There's a large number of people who have knowledge and experience that provides a tremendous capacity to build on. And I think it's important that these people care about this. So they're committed, and there's a real opportunity going forward. So I'd like to invite any, I probably use up all the time, but I'd like to invite any comments or questions at this time. And one of the things which I would be interested, my colleague Brian would be interested in knowing is, based on your experience with the RHS, either as someone who is involved in data collection piece or the data analysis and reporting piece, or as a user of RHS data and results, or even just as a really interested observer, are the things which I've talked about the things you would have talked about if you were up here today giving key messages and highlights? So with that, I'll just invite any questions or comments.
Hello. My name is Leona Starr. I'm the research associate with Nanandawewagamig. You guys did come to one of our events that we hosted. One of the things that I seen on the screen in terms of one of the challenges identified was communities' expectations of ownership of data. Mm-hmm. That is never a question. I think you have the ownership and possession piece of OCAP confused with one another, because inherently the data that we collect from communities will always retain ownership of that. The questionable piece is whether or not they will ever possess it due to the lack of infrastructure available in our communities. So I think that piece needs to be corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Before I leave, Brian? Oh, yes.
Hey, hi, I'm Lyle Cardinal from Big Stone Cree Nation, and I collected the data on our reserve, and I find that, like, you talked about sending mobile teams to reserves, or else some reserves had the locals do it, and I was a local collecting data on our reserve,
right.
And I think that's the best approach, because the people, when you walk up to somebody's house and asked them to do this survey. It is a really personal survey. A lot of the questions were really personal, and answering those questions, having an outsider, present those questions to them, I felt would make a lot of the people uncomfortable. They were a little bit uncomfortable, with me, knowing me. So I think the best way to conduct these surveys is to have your own people conduct the surveys. Get somebody from the community, in every community, not send a mobile unit out to go to a reserve. Try to find somebody that's going to connect, that already knows the people, and they already have a connection with these people. And that would be my recommendation, to continue it that way and try and go further than that area.
Good, thank you. Yeah, we found quite a range of approaches, and often there was a combination of how do you encourage participation, make participation as comfortable for people as possible, versus we have this much money to actually collect data and try and hit these targets. And so what's the most efficient way of doing that? Although in some cases it was found that the mobile teams actually made very good connections as well. So there's just a whole bunch, and in many cases it was a hybrid solution as well, that both approaches were used. Yes.
Hi, my name's Alam Taboon. I work at Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada.
Yes.
I'm just curious, how did you go about measuring the usage and awareness of RHS data? We did. This was not a survey or anything like that. It was basically, the idea was to try and gather examples of use, and so we approached the leads in each of the regional survey partners and asked them if they could suggest communities that might be willing to talk to us. And so it was not an exhaustive list. It was a number of examples. So that's what we have in the report. Thank you.
Does that answer your question well enough?
Yeah, so I work on another survey program with the FNIGC, and so that's one of our struggles, is that tracking usage is very difficult, right? It will never be exhaustive, so I was just curious as to how you went about it.
Yeah, I think this was sort of a, we had the opportunity a couple of years ago to do the evaluation of the FNREIS, and it was a process evaluation, so it did not really get into, it was more around the front end and to the destination point, but we didn't get to the use point. So this one, I gave FNIGC a lot of credit and its board, et cetera, to say, let's tackle the use part of this. So hopefully there's lessons learned from this evaluation as to how we could that could be done better.
That's great, thank you.
Can I just take 1 second to give a plug if all the questions? So Brian, who's over by the door there, and I was actually he was supposed to come up here and answer the tough questions, and I was looking for him, and I thought he had left the room. But we're going to be here during the remainder of today and parts of tomorrow. We'd really be pleased to hear from you if there's any impacts of the RHS that you've experienced or seen that you'd like to share with us. We don't want to pull you away from the important stuff that's going on at this conference, so it may be just giving us some contact information so we can get in touch with you and follow up, say, with a telephone call or something, and gather any other information. Also, you're welcome to touch base if you have anything I've said today you would like to add to, or you think misses the mark. So that's my thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
So any of you wondering when his report is going to be available, it should be available by around the end of April. So you didn't know that it was going to be a full body interactive conference, did you? We have to avoid falling objects. I think later on today we'll be collecting some data on who's quickest at avoiding things falling from the ceiling. Anyway, we'll have to look, see what that's all about. We're going to take a 15-minute coffee break, bathroom break, fresh air break, and I am going to be a stickler. I'd like to be back here by 11:15 so we can have our panel. Thank you.